Good evening and welcome to the Policy Development and Strategic Direction Committee meeting for January 11th, 2022. I've taken attendance. We do have regrets from Councillor Wheat and Councillor Coleman. Before we begin, we're going to start with the election of chair and vice chair. I'd like to recognize that because this meeting is being held electronically, there will be no mechanism for a secret ballot. Any votes will be held by the raising of the hands in open session. If there is a tie, the selection will be done by lot. I'd like to open the floor to nominations for the position of chair. Councillor Howes.
Thanks, Nancy. I'd like to nominate that Councillor McAlpine continue as chair.
Councillor McAlpine, do you accept the nomination?
I would, yeah.
Councillor Ferrier.
Would I be able to move the waiving of the bylaw? There's a bylaw mechanism we had to do to have Councillor Pierce remain on. I'd like to move to do that.
Thank you. You can do that. Do I have a seconder to suspend the bylaw? Councillor Bell? Is there any more nominations for the position of chair? Okay, do I have a motion to close nominations? Councillor Pierce and Councillor Miller. And do I have nominations for the position of vice chair?
It's a point of order. I think the Paris downstairs meeting room is unmuted.
That's the one I'm talking through. Sorry. So do I have nominations for the position of vice chair? Councillor Miller?
I'll nominate Councillor Chambers.
Councillor Chambers, do you accept?
Actually, no, I don't. And I'd like someone else that perhaps hasn't been a chairman or a vice chairman this term, and I believe Councillor Gatward would fit that bill, so I'll nominate her instead.
Councillor Gatward, do you accept the nominations?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Is there any more nominations for the position of vice chair? Councillor Pierce.
Move to close.
I've seconded to close. Mayor Bailey. All in favor? All right. Councillor McAlpine, you're declared chair. Councillor Gatward, vice chair. Councillor McAlpine, you have the floor.
Well, thanks very much. Everybody, welcome to the Policy Development and Strategic Direction Committee agenda. We've already taken attendance, and if we could have the approval of the agenda. Is somebody move that? Moved by Joan and second by John Bell. Is there any additions? Okay, all in favor? Motion passed. Is there any declarations of pecuniary interests present? If there is, at the appropriate time, if you could declare those, then we'll move on. Delegations, petitions, and presentations. Is there any today? Nancy?
No, there's not.
Okay. Okay, seeing none. Adoption of the minutes from the previous meeting. We have a move by John Pierce, second by Mayor Bailey. Okay. All in favor? Okay. Any opposed? Seeing none. Business arising from the minutes. Is there any? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to consent items. 8.1, consent items 8.11, RPT 22-19, proposed building bylaw, Richard Weedhouse. Would you like to make a presentation on that, Richard?
Thanks, Mr. McAlpine. No, I don't really have anything to present. The report was meant to describe the fact that our bylaw was outdated since 2005, and it was time to change it to recognize the changes in the building code.
So we have a recommendation in front of us. Do we have a motion to accept that? Moved by John Pierce and second by Mayor Bailey. Is there any questions for Rick today? Councillor Miller, and then
Thank you,
Councillor Gatward.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Three to Rick. Rick, you mentioned in your report that you consulted with finance and legal. Given that this is the first rewrite in 16, 17 years, just wondering, did you consult with the public at all, or with the building industry, or did you look at other municipalities? I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about that. Because I do know, as a counselor, sometimes we get some people bringing up concerns about the building division. I'm just wondering if you were able to fix any of these things, or some of the things that you were able to clear up.
Well, it was a process that took about 2 months, and it mainly dealt with other municipal building bylaws that were already up to date. None of the changes actually affect the function of the building department or the permit process. They're basically changes to identify new code sections. The code changed dramatically in 2012. That was the main part, but no process changes.
Okay. Okay. You answered my question. Thank you.
Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Richard. I noted that an architect and an engineer are required to get a building permit. And I'm wondering, on the farm, they have a lot of those pre-engineered buildings that are sometimes called Quonset huts, or maybe a different shape than a Quonset hut. But because they're engineered by a company and then sold widely, does that count as being engineered? And architects would design those, I'm assuming. They don't need an architect and an engineer to erect one of those type of buildings, or do they?
You're correct, Councillor Gatward, that when they're pre-engineered, the drawings, they don't require to hire one to review the project. If it's a large building, 600 square meters is the plateau. Larger than that, they will require an engineer to review. But if it's Quonset hut, that type of building, it's just the engineered drawings that is required.
Okay, and no architect?
Not on a farm building. You wouldn't be required.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is just a quick one. If somebody wanted to build a simple rectangular, not a fancy, but a simple rectangular garage that was, say, 12 or 14 by 14 feet or 16 feet long, would they need an architect and an engineer for that type of building as well?
No.
No?
They actually don't even need a qualified designer if it's their own garage for a small building. They can draw up the construction drawings themselves. They just need to provide an accurate description of what they're going to build for a small building.
Great. Thank you very much for answering that. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Okay. Do we have any other questions for Rick? Okay, seeing none, we have a mover and a seconder. So call the vote. All in favor? Okay, any opposed? Seeing none, passed. Okay. We have two consent items to be received. RPT 2218 Recreation Master Plan Status Update. Cindy Stevenson, would you like to speak to it, Cindy?
Good evening, Councillor McAlpine and members of council. I'm just pleased to present our annual report, and I'd like to commend the staff who advanced many projects throughout the year in 2021, and also relay our appreciation for council's support. and happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions for Cindy? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Cindy. I'm going to go at this question in a roundabout way, but reading the report, you realize how important school boards are to the recreation master plan status. You talk about schools in recommendations 18, 22 to 25, and recommendation 36, which is the tennis courts. You talk about joint ventures related initiatives with the school boards. You talk about active school transportation and safe routes, after school programming. You mentioned how they've got the facilities closed at the moment, how they're looking for an increase in fees. Roundabout way, in your opinion, Cindy, how good is our working relationship right now with the various school boards?
Through the chair, I will say that it's been difficult to advance our relationship with them throughout the pandemic. They've been dealing with a lot of challenges, the same as the County of Brant has. And particularly the community use of schools has been a challenge for us in delivering programs like camps and other recreational programming to the community that we normally would through the schools. Fortunately, we have been able to continue our after-school programming with them. Prior to the pandemic, the Grand Erie District School Board did have a meeting with partners to discuss various issues. And I know we're planning on continuing that, but I think because of the pandemic that hasn't happened. So I think there is some work to do once we get through this difficult period and building our connections with both school boards.
I appreciate the answer, Cindy. Thank you. I'm just thinking out loud there, not a question per se, but well, maybe it is. I'm just wondering if we sitting around the table, us councillors and mayor, should be doing more to improve our relationship with the school board. And I'll take full blame for that one too, because I know we've been invited to attend meetings, meet some of the trustees over the years. And I'll be honest with you, I've never gone to a single one. Always kind of been busy, hasn't been a priority, but I'm just wondering going forward, Cindy, do you think it might help if we got maybe more involved with the trustees? You think that would help, or any thoughts through you, Mr. Chair?
Through the chair, certainly I don't think it would hurt. Any connection in building that relationship, I would think would help versus not having that communication and trying to advance our interests. So.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, maybe I'm just, like I say, reading it. wasn't quite fully cognizant of how important the school boards were to. I mean, I knew, but I didn't realize, I guess, fully. So, yeah, maybe something to think about in the future for us sitting around the table. So, thank you, Cindy.
Okay. Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Cindy. On page 99, maybe that's 89. I haven't got my glasses on. Maybe it's 69, sorry. At the bottom of the page, it says Onondaga Ballpark retrofit for this year. The past Recreation Advisory Committee for the area, which included Onondaga, ball had ended in Onondaga, and we had talked about removing the fencing in the park to make it more open for users in the village to get to the park and so on. Has there been a resurgence of interest in ball? And because I was surprised to see that. I guess that's why I'm asking that question.
Yep, through the chair. So that park has been, I think, in the plans for a refresh for a couple of years now. This goes back prior to when the pandemic happened. And we were able to have a public meeting in the area to gather the public's feedback on, what they'd like to see happen at that park. So that feedback has been pulled together, and our landscape architect has been working on a proposed design for the park. And we'd like to hopefully in this first quarter, put that plan back out to the public for their input and their thoughts on if they're happy with it or want to tweak what we're proposing. So certainly you're right, Councillor Gatward. I think that ball in that area has seen a decline, and we're likely looking at some other options for that park.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, I'd love to see when the plan is done. I'm sure we'll get a copy of it. Thank you, Cindy.
Any other questions for Cindy? Okay. Could we have a motion to receive the report? Moved by Councillor Howes and the seconder, Councillor Leferrier. So all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, thanks very much, Cindy. We have RPT 2215 Temporary Patio Allowance Program for Public Safety. Russell Press, would you like to make any comments about that? Or Allison?
Really, this is just an extension of the existing program. It is under the existing programs. We did build in that flexibility, and it's done, as you know, in direct response to moving to the modified step 2, and also some lessons learned on what works best for public safety within enclosed spaces, enclosed commercial spaces. So I'm happy to answer any other questions that might.
Do you have any questions for Allison? Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Alison. Alison, this has been around now a couple of seasons, I think. Can you comment on any negative feedback we've had from it? Because I can only record positive feedback.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Bell. We did receive some concerns at the initial launch of the programs, and I would say the patio program. And that was really related to how traffic and pedestrians would navigate these on the main street. We did have staff speak to those people, and we showed them the mitigation measures in place, and they were happy with that. And we didn't receive anything negative towards that after that time.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up, Mr. Chair, Alison, does this bode well then for the future downtown Paris master plan, where we might extend such patio type of activity?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we hope so. This was actually maybe an unintended consequence of doing this, is seeing some of the possibilities that can be done with, extending some of the outdoor space. People really seem to enjoy it, and it seemed a little bit crazy to people when it was first proposed to have sort of patios in the wintertime. But they were very well received, and I think people really enjoyed the opportunity to use the space a little bit differently and see how it can actually work in the context of the downtown. We do hope that it'll bode well for some of those changes moving forward.
Okay. Any further questions? Okay, could we have a motion to receive the report then? Moved by Councillor Pierce, second by Councillor Bell. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, passed. Staff reports. RPT 2201, Brant Connects, Joint Committee of Broadband Strategy. And Allison again, if you'd like to speak to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have anything to add to this. As you know, this is in response to a delegation from the Paris District Chamber of Commerce. I believe in October, they came to council as a delegation and made this proposal. As you know, the provincial announcement and the funding that's going towards broadband is very much welcomed, and we're looking forward to seeing some of it roll out, but we don't know all the details of it yet. There still are a lot of variables and unknowns, and we do want to make sure that everything stays in line with all of the hard work and effort that's already being put into this by Western Ontario Wardens Caucus and SWIFT as a subsidiary. So we want to make sure that there's alignment there. So the recommendation is indeed to form the committee, but to maybe evolve some of the recommendations as we know more about the provincial program rollout. And there's an opportunity to speak with Western Ontario Wardens Caucus and SWIFT to make sure that any recommendations are in alignment.
Okay. Do we have any questions for Allison? Councillor House.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Allison. Thank you for this report, Allison, and we do look forward to seeing improvement opportunities related to a subject that comes up time and time again. So it's encouraging to see this joint committee starting. My question is actually coming from putting my library board hat on for a minute. I know that some of our library staff have some experience in working on this subject. Would you be open to inviting some participation from the library in that committee?
We would certainly welcome that. We're happy to invite the inaugural meeting. As I mentioned in the report too, there are no terms of reference. I mean, the ask would be that the committee as it's formed would draft those terms of reference at the inaugural meeting and shortly thereafter for presentation and approval by council. And that could certainly be, the membership composition could certainly be part of that.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Gatward.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's mentioned at the top of page 3 of the report that membership would be extended to the mayor and council liaison to SWIFT. And I'm wondering if they're both willing to serve on this committee. Do you know?
I am.
Okay.
Through the chair, yes, I am, Councillor.
That's great news. Thank you. I didn't know if Allison knew or anybody had committed, or that's good news. Thank you very much.
Mayor Bailey, did you have a question for Allison?
No, I was just letting Joe know that I was going to be on that committee, on that board.
Oh, okay. Okay, we do have a recommendation. We have a mover for the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Howes and second by Mayor Bailey. Is there any further questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll call the vote. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, it is passed. We're busy, Allison, tonight. RPT 2202, Brant Transit Update, Allison Newton. Would you like to speak to it?
I would just want to preface this, and it is stated in the report, but just as a sort of reminder, that all of the data and sort of anecdotal information that's received in the report has to be viewed through the lens of COVID, unfortunately. We did have 1 month where the Brant eRide, Brant Transit, formerly eRide, was operating pre-pandemic, but since then it's been adjusting as we all have. So unfortunately, we don't have a lot of data of what this may or may not look like during what, quote unquote, normal times. So we're doing the best we can, but there's still some unknowns of of what the potential for this program would be. We know that it's larger, could be larger than it currently is. But it's hard to say what that uptake will look like I said, in normal times. So it's just a bit of a caveat to how the data is viewed. And I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Councillor Pierce and then Councillor House.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, through you. Yeah, just the one question I do have in regards to the graph you that's posted in there for the ridership, and there's talk about cancellations and stuff like that. I know we had an issue off the hop where the numbers that were being presented included those cancellations. I just want to confirm that that is or is not happening anymore.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. That has been corrected. So the Supervisor of Public Transit does manually go through these and checks them against invoices every single month.
Okay.
So that issue has been corrected. The one thing that I would note that's not included in that ridership data is the industrial commuter pilot. So the numbers for that. And we also ran a program with, if you recall, our initial COVID response, we partnered with Conestoga and the Ag Associations for an Ag Operator program that ran at the airport. And we did partner with Conestoga on a transit solution, taking students from the bus terminal out to the airport where those classes were held. And that ridership is also not included. So that would add roughly 2,000 rides to the yearly data.
Okay, so just to be clear, the numbers we are seeing on that graph are actual riders.
They are actual riders.
Thank you.
Councillor House.
And thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to Allison. Thank you for all the work that you and your team have been doing on this. It's a valuable service within our community. I do have a couple of questions. We see the ridership by quarter in the charts. I was wondering if you can speak anecdotally about the ridership in general. Are we seeing the same people using the service more frequently, or are we seeing new users adopting the program every month when we see the chart increasing quarter after quarter? Can you tell us approximately how many individual users, not trips, are served by Brant Transit on a monthly basis? My second question is specific to the industrial commuter opportunities. I wholeheartedly support this initiative. We're seeing businesses that are temporarily closing, not because they don't have customers, but because they don't have workers. So this is an unprecedented situation, and any steps we can take to improve this are very worthwhile. The feedback from Rembos on the pilot program is terrific. Can you please tell us more about the number of users that took part in that program and a little bit about how it works? Do the riders pay, or does the employer pay for the service? Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor House. So regarding ridership, I can tell you averages, and I'll take some of the 2021 data. So the average number of rides per month that we would have in 2021 was 670. And it averaged 280 individual users, making up that 670 trips. And we're averaging new users per month in 2021 of 32. Again, I'll caveat that with our offline booking. There could be some anomalies in there because if somebody were to book offline or out of the app, and to just call and request a ride, we don't necessarily have all their information. So there could be some new users. I mean, that'll be logged as a trip, but it may or may not be a new user. That being said, typically the offline users are repeat users. They are people who are generally, all the seniors will book offline, and they are recurring trips for regular appointments. So most of those would be repeat users. So we're seeing, like I said, that roughly 32 per month of new user uptake in 2021 anyway. But, we did experience a period of shutdown in 2021 as well. So obviously we'd like to see that number going up significantly moving forward. And in regards to the industrial commuter pilot, So we had between 3 and 6 users per day participating in that program. And it does operate 5 days per week. And it would take them from the last transit stop in Brantford out to the company location in Canesville. That cost in this particular situation is being absorbed by the company. We're open to work with any users, however they want to position it to make it work for them. But in this particular situation, it was the cost was absorbed by Rembos. Like I said, it depending on the shifting and scheduling, the numbers fluctuated, but between 3 and 6 people per day were using it, or employees per day. And with the Conestoga program that went from the bus terminal out to the airport, that also was being absorbed by Conestoga. I know that's not part of the industrial program, but just the two sort of specialized transit options that we offered, the costs were being absorbed by them. But staff have done 3 proposals to new companies in recent months since we decided to keep on going with this initiative. And like I said, we're willing to customize the program to whatever works best for their specific needs.
Thank you very much. That's great information and great work from you and your team. Thank you.
Councillor Pierce.
And thanks, Mr. Chair, for the second time here. Just something I thought of. Allison, can you tell me, I know, we have rides from the county to the city and from the city to the county, but are there rides being logged for citizens of Brantford going from within the city to another destination in the city?
Mr. Chair, to Councillor here. So the parameters of the current program are that the destination has to either start or end in the county. So we're not doing city to city rides at this point.
Okay, so just to confirm, it has to start or end in the county. So that makes sense to me. So there is no city to city. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Allison. I agree that the cancellation timeframe should be increased. And I'm wondering, it was increased from 2 hours to 12 hours notice. Was that a recommendation from the company that runs Brant Transit? I'm just thinking of somebody gets up in the morning and they're sick and they've got a ride booked for the afternoon and they're thinking, I can't go. I better call and cancel. It might be 5 or 6 hours notice, but it certainly wouldn't be 12 hours notice. So I just wonder why it wasn't say half of 12, only 6 hours notice. And was it the company that wanted that 12, or how did that come about? I'm sorry, I can't hear Allison. Can anybody else? No, we
I'm having
can't.
problems too, actually.
Sorry,
Oh.
Is that any better?
Yeah.
That's better.
So the vast amount of cancellations are happening currently within our current parameters on time. So that's 2 hours, but it's usually right at 2 hours. The difficulty is that we can't, it's not necessarily enough time to rebook that driver and reroute them to another user. And typically the drivers are getting their schedules for the next day the night before. So that's where the 12 hours came from. That being said, we understand life happens. As you said, people may wake up not feeling ill or not feeling well and not be able to take a ride and need to cancel. So we do ask that the supervisor has discretion in those situations to maybe not count that as a penalty against them. Really, this is meant to capture the sort of repeat offenders. And I will stress that the vast majority of both the on-time and last minute or at doors or no-shows are a handful of people that are doing it repeatedly. So it's really meant for those. It's we certainly don't want to penalize people as a one-off if they wake up ill or there's an emergency. That's really not the intent. And so we do want to build in some discretion to account for those instances.
Okay, great. That's fine, Allison. Thank you very much for that explanation. Appreciate it.
Councillor Bell, and then Councillor Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Alison. Alison, it's good to see the number of riders increasing, and that's one measure of how the programme is performing. Do you have any measures of efficiency or effectiveness? And things that come to mind would be what percentage of the available time of our fleet is being used for serving customers. And the second one would be, what is the cost per passenger kilometre? And do you have comparative measures with other transit systems or with taxis, for example, as to whether we're actually doing well or could do better?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. We do have other municipal comparators. So that was actually part of the data set that we subscribed to this year. So we would be able to gauge that type of thing. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I can certainly circulate that to council that would let you know how our ridership is compared to other comparable municipalities or ones offering microtransit. And like I said, we didn't include that in the report, but I can certainly circulate those comparators to council. And I'm sorry, your other question was...
Well, through the chair, I'm interested in efficiency measures, Alison. So, you know, if I have a fleet of 8 or 9 vehicles, I can't remember how many we have now, but I'd like to think that they were being operated 80% of the time, and maybe 80% is the wrong number. I don't know what the right number is, but I'm sure there is a right number somewhere. So what do we have? And the second efficiency measure would be, you know, what is it costing us to move a passenger per kilometre? And I'm sure we could compare that metric with taxis, with rideshare programs, and with other municipal transit systems.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in regards to efficiency, we are operating at approximately 90% on average per day. And that is sort of occupancy of all our fleet vehicles. And I did mention in the fall, it's a little bit of a concern because we are so close to capacity in our fleet. But I would again say that that's capacity of our limited capacity. So right now we can't fill our vehicles. And again, that's because of, you know, allowing space and distancing due to, you know, public health measures. So we can technically fit more people in our vehicles, but we're not right now. So with our current limited capacity, our vehicles are nearing capacity, but we hesitate to add more fleet at this time, again, until some of those measures are lifted, but we are very close to being at that point. And certainly that other data, I don't have it in front of me, but I can get that for you and send it along to all of committee.
Yeah, thank you, Alison. Just to be very clear, if I may, Mr. Chair, are you saying that 90% of the time of our vehicles during their working day, they're moving passengers around the county?
For you, Mr. Chair, yes, or going to pickups.
Understood. Yeah, thank you, Alison.
Okay, Councillor Ferrier.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Through you, Alison, I think this is a really good report, and it's good to see growth despite COVID, et cetera, and that this is a new idea that is catching on. As Councillor Miller once said at this committee, it takes 3 to 5 years for a transit system to kind of catch on and find its footing. I think if you add 2 years of COVID in there, maybe it takes closer to 5 to 6. And on the piece about the supervisor having some discretion, I think that's great, especially because, this is my understanding, the supervisor in this case would be Sheena Yarrick, who's been with this project from the beginning. So she knows these riders' names by heart and works with them, and to have that discretion with a lot of context is excellent. On the scalability piece, this is the question I wanted to ask. We know that we've been really lucky with COVID in our transit system, that unlike other transit systems, we haven't had to take out huge amounts of money from our budgets or from the province in order to keep them sustainable during this time. I have a hunch that over time, the city of Brantford is going to want to service the areas that have been annexed that are closer to the borders of the county because there's development there, et cetera. For that to be feasible for them, they may be interested in, and we've talked about having some joint master transit stuff going on between both our communities. If they were to run a route or two through the county the same way that Norfolk does, would that be helpful in terms of creating more efficiencies in our program? Like, we take people from Brantford to the county. If they're doing some of that as well and having some of that inter-county city transit with routes, because that's how they operate, would that be helpful? Would there be, is there something we should be looking at in the near future to look at the sort of feasibility or the how something like that may or may not work for us?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. You know, personally, I think that would be great. I mean, the more that we can partner with surrounding transit, it's about getting people to their destinations as quickly and efficiently as possible. So if we're able to do that, that would certainly be ideal. That being said, it's hard to say with the scalability because we haven't been doing mass scripts. You know, we've been doing it with individual employers or, you know, an individual education cohort, students, that type of thing. We haven't really expanded it on a larger scale as we would have liked to. For example, I'm sure there's opportunities with tourism, that type of thing to move larger groups of people around. We haven't been able to do that because of COVID. That being said, I know Sheena works very closely with the city, and we are always looking at opportunities of and what their users are asking for, and vice versa. So later on this year, we'd be coming to the end of the current contract with our service provider. I'm not sure that there would be real benefit to switching providers, but there is some opportunity to look at what that scalability is going to be, what we would like it to look like in the future, and how we might be able to partner not just with Brantford but other surrounding municipalities, and like I said, be able to make trips more efficient for people just in the region in general.
Thank you.
Mayor Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I would just like to let Allison know that I've met with the mayor of Cambridge and North Dumfries, and they're very eager to hitch on to our little transportation plan. I know that people in Glenmorris and St. George obviously gravitate to Cambridge more than they do to Brantford, a lot of people anyway. And also I'd like to do some more investigation with Woodstock, because there's a big tie between obviously Burford and Cathcart and all those little towns that way that would have huge church connections. And I don't just mean Sunday mornings, I mean choir practice and all kinds of things that go with being an active member of a church. And I know that we have a lot of interest in that part of the county right now. So I think during COVID days, when things are a little slower, it would be a great time for us to foster those partnerships so that when things open up, we're in place to expand quickly. So just know that I'm talking transportation all the time with people, other mayors, and they're very anxious to hook on. So something we should be aware of.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mayor Bailey. Thank you for that. And I would just add that there are a couple of regional initiatives underway, some further along than others. One by SCORE that would look at more regional transit opportunities, and another looking at sort of the Grand River watershed area. Like I said, in different various stages of sophistication, all of them sort of early days. But there are certainly opportunities to look at all of those initiatives underway and see what part we're going to play in it.
Do we have any further questions for Allison? Okay, we do have a recommendation. If we have a motion to approve, moved by Councillor Howes and second by Councillor Pierce. Is there any further questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll call the vote. All in favor? Okay, any opposed? Okay, seeing none, we've approved. Moving on to 9.3, RPT 22-14 nuisance odor pilot project results. Greg Bergeron. Greg, do you have a report for us?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, and good evening to the members of the committee. I do have the report, and I'm certainly here to answer any questions. It was a short report. The pilot project is completed, as you've most likely read. There have been some instances where we've recorded some higher readings by using the nasal ranger, and happy to answer any questions that the committee has.
Okay, do we have any questions for Greg? Okay, so we have a decision, I guess, to make on this one. And the committee make a decision to determine if a bylaw is warranted or desirable, and the staff be directed to hire a consultant to assist with the development of a nuisance bylaw that the committee and council confirm that a bylaw is warranted. Now, would somebody like to make a motion? Councillor Miller. Yeah, you're on mute.
Well, I'm just moving the recommendation, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And do we have a seconder for the recommendation? Moved and seconded by Mayor Bailey.
Excuse me, Chair. We just need to know if they feel if the bylaw is recommended or not in the motion. We need to just specify.
Okay. So, Councillor Miller, would you like to move that a bylaw is necessary then?
Yeah, yes, Mr. Chair. And I mean, the reason I'm moving is simply because we've come this far. So I don't want us to back out now.
Yeah. Okay. And yeah, that's okay with you, Mayor Bailey? Second?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Robert Chambers, would you like to comment?
Just a couple comments with regard to the I guess proposed bylaw, or proposing to have a bylaw. At some point after we adopt the official plan, the comprehensive zoning bylaw is going to have to be brought up to date to coincide with the new official plan, et cetera. And I'm just wondering if this shouldn't be kind of done in conjunction with the comprehensive zoning bylaw update, because some of the, I've always contended that the best time to stop odors is before they start, and land uses, et cetera, are usually regulated by the zoning bylaw. So I can see an overlap of, it's going to get really complicated if one is done without the other, in my opinion. And I'm just wondering if that makes sense to staff, or whether I'm perhaps connecting two things that aren't connectable.
I see Jody came on. Would you like to answer that, Jody, or take a stab at it?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Chambers. He's actually, Councillor Chambers, you pointed out something that's quite applicable. That's quite true. And I think that staff would absolutely work in conjunction with what's happening with the comprehensive zoning bylaw to make sure there's no inconsistencies.
Okay, a follow-up, Councillor Chambers?
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, as well, there's a whole raft of legal issues that Jody might want to comment on, with legal non-conforming issues. If you try to regulate something that is in existence already, you run into those kind of issues as well. So that, again, is kind of being addressed in the comprehensive zoning bylaw mandate, and maybe Jody can comment on that as well, because you can't regulate something that's already legally in place, et cetera, and it gets really complicated. Maybe Jody can elaborate on that. Legal non-conforming issues as it relates to odor bylaws and nuisance bylaws.
So yes, through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Chambers. I think Councillor Chambers has gone to law school since the last time we met, and he's correct. Those uses are grandfathered. And so with a legal non-conforming status, the notion is that over time, those uses will disappear. But nonetheless, they do have a certain status. They're entitled to remain for however long they're there. But if there's a significant change in use, then they lose that status. But Councillor Chambers is correct.
Greg, would you like to comment on that as well, or?
Yes, certainly through you, Mr. Chair, I can comment, and Jody is right, and so is Councillor Chambers from a land use perspective and a zoning bylaw. However, my understanding, and Jody can correct me if I'm misspeaking, but I believe under the Municipal Act, if we pass a bylaw to deal with the nuisance portion, which would be odor or other nuisances, that would be applicable the day that the bylaw is enacted. So we wouldn't be able to establish any penalties for what's happened in the past, but it would be in effect and in force on the day that the bylaw is enacted. So we would have some ability to enforce that bylaw under the Municipal Act. From a land use point of view, not so much, but through the Municipal Act, yes.
Yes, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. So my answer to Councillor Chambers is with respect to the land use piece, the legal non-conforming aspect through the Planning Act, and only that.
Councillor Chambers and then Councillor Gatward.
And just the last thing that has to be factored into the bylaw, as well as the Farm Protection and Practices Act, or whatever that's called, because that is another overlay that protects agricultural uses from nuisance complaints about nuisances and nuisance odors, I guess. So that as well should be factored in as well. So I guess the point I'm making is that it's not just a simple sit down and craft a bylaw. There's a lot of factors and a lot of scenarios that need to be taken into consideration. So the first step, in my opinion, is to wait until we're dealing with the comprehensive zoning bylaw and try to mesh an odor nuisance bylaw with land use planning and that kind of those kind of issues.
Okay, Greg, would you like to make a comment?
No, I think Councillor Chambers, through you, Mr. Chair, I believe he's covered his thoughts.
Okay, Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Greg. The 123 inspections, of those 38 occasions were higher than the 7 DT value. And I really appreciate the chart because it breaks down exactly what's causing the nuisance odors. But as has been stated by Councillor Chambers, these are existing grandfathered operations that we can't enforce any new bylaw upon. New cannabis operations, which is the largest category, I believe, would they not be regulated, anything new opening up through the zoning bylaw as far as odors, Greg?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Gatward. Again, we're going back to land use and under the Planning Act. So the zoning bylaw saw an amendment that would cover some of the higher restrictions for cannabis production facilities. That was enacted in November of 2020. So anything prior to that would enjoy the legal non-conforming status. with respect to the land use. But as I've mentioned before, we do have the ability, if we pass a municipal act bylaw, to do some enforcement, and all the comments provided with relation to the normal farm practices board, those are definitely real comments and real concerns that we've discussed at the staff level on multiple occasions. So we are acutely aware of some of the issues and challenges moving forward with a nuisance bylaw.
Well, thank you. And my last follow-up question and comment, Mr. Chair, is it said the remaining 85 samples had no detection or DT values under 7. Did staff do those locations because they'd had odor complaints, or did they just choose them because they were possible odorous sources? And then the last question, where's our rubber factory? I didn't know we had one.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Gatward. We did go outside of the county in answer to your question about the rubber factory, and I suspected that that was probably going to come up. And we did that because we were aware of certain facilities in the region that did have some very strong odors, and we did that as an exercise to get a better understanding of the odor characters, I guess, and the strength of some of the odors that we are aware of. I'm sorry, your first question was?
The 85 samples that had no detection or DT values under 7, did staff choose those 85 sampling locations just because they were of an odorous nature, or had they actually had complaints from those other 85 locations?
Through you, Mr. Chair, most of them were facilities where we've had some historical complaints, and we did endeavor to conduct some fence line monitoring and take some odor sampling on a proactive basis to make a determination on, the frequency and the intensity and at what point we are detecting odor. So some of it was proactive. I can say that just looking at the database earlier, some of the complaints seem to have dissipated, but some of them have also melded into zoning complaints. And I'm also aware that, and some of the residents that have been complaining are also aware of this pilot project. So I think they might be waiting to see what the results are going to be.
Okay, thank you very much, Greg. I really appreciate your thorough investigation of this whole subject.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I recall, and I think it's probably 2 years ago, we had a resident who lived in the area of Maple Avenue North and Highway 2. He was complaining about odors coming from a nearby cannabis factory. Am I right in thinking, from what I've heard tonight, that there is no recourse that we could offer him to address that situation, because that plant has been around for longer than our, what was it? I think somewhere in 2020, the rules were changed?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. That's one of the facilities that would enjoy legal non-conforming status. They were established prior to the more stringent regulations that were enacted in November of 2020.
Thank you.
Okay. We have any other questions? Okay, I don't see any. We have a mover and a seconder, so we'll call the vote. All in favor?
Mr. Chair, could you be clear about what it is we're voting on?
Okay, that we proceed with creating a bylaw. That's my understanding. Is that correct, Councillor Miller?
You are correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
And to be clear, proceeding with it now and not, as Councillor Chambers had suggested, that we wait for the zoning bylaw update?
I think we would be proceeding, but with that in mind.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, it's my understanding, maybe in light of what Councillor Chambers brought up, that we would leave it at staff's discretion to work with, to meld the two together, make sure they don't conflict. And staff did say that tonight. So,
Is that reasonable, Greg?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that sounds reasonable to me, and I will defer to Jody, and we can certainly discuss it further as we move along.
Okay. So with that clarity in mind, just I guess revisit the vote. All in favor? Okay. And any opposed? Okay. Seeing none, that is passed. Okay. I don't see any communications. Is that correct, Nancy?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So Michael Bradley, would you like to make your update?
Good evening, Mr. Chair. I just have a fairly short update. My focus will be on the COVID-19 pandemic and our response to that. That's pretty much mostly what's taking my attention these days. I think I could comfortably say that we're currently in a state of what I'm calling high alert with regards to the COVID-19 emergency. And our critical concern right now, like most organizations, is about staff resourcing with our primary concerns around frontline and services that involve boots on the ground. So our EOC, our Emergency Operations Center, is meeting weekly again, which we haven't done for a number of months, as well as the joint EOC, which is a group comprised of ourselves, the city, 6 nations, the Brant County Health Unit, the Brant Community Healthcare System, and a few other partners. It's also meeting weekly. So our emergency plan and our pandemic plan and all of the training that we've taken would advise us to begin to wind down non-essential services as we start to see staffing become constrained. And so that's what we're presently doing. And I think you're seeing the results of that with press releases coming out about certain services that we are winding down to a minor extent. I won't get into the specific numbers. I don't think that would be appropriate, but we are seeing increasing number of staff in isolation week over week. And we are anticipating that next week will be a challenging week for us if the current path continues. This week we are dealing with a fairly number of absences, but we are stable. Next week I think we will see some challenges. So our response as an organization is much like what we did in the early days of the pandemic and in the various waves, is to remain vigilant and constantly reevaluate our status. So we have our management teams in areas that are what we would call essential or critical services are meeting either daily or at minimum bi-weekly. Our SMT group is meeting every Thursday afternoon. I meet with Chief Russ King with Paramedic Services on a daily basis. And I also met with our entire supervisors group last Thursday. And so that was the entire group. And the purpose of all those meetings is to maintain a good flow of communication throughout the organization, because we're going to have to draw on all parts of the organization as the situation continues to evolve if we start to get into significant staffing shortages. So our focus will be on maintaining critical essential services. Those critical essential services will be water, wastewater, fire, paramedic services, winter control and road safety, and curbside pickup and operation of Biggers Lane landfill. And then following that, we would be focusing on what we call essential services, which are cemeteries, information technology, finance, legal and bylaw enforcement, human resources, clerks and council services, fleet, transit, communications, and forestry and tree maintenance. So that's consistent with our emergency and our pandemic plan. So that's my update, Mr. Chair. Again, we are in a heightened state of alert right now, given what's going on, and we're not alone. Most organizations right now are facing the same situations, and I think we're just waiting to hope to hear some positive trends from our public health experts on where we see this going over the next couple of weeks. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
We have some questions. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I threw you to Michael. Michael, just how are the ambulances holding up? Are we seeing any periods without ambulances available? Because I just see on the news yesterday that Toronto had one on the weekend.
Sure, Mr. Chair. So, I mean, the paramedic service is in a tenuous position right now. Obviously, driven by two things. One thing, our own ability to staff ambulances, because we do have staff in isolation. The paramedics do follow a different set of rules than the rest of us do around isolation, so that's challenging. But I think we are holding our own. We have staffed another ambulance and put it on the road to make sure that we have coverage. But then the other piece to that is offload delays at the Brain Community Healthcare System, which obviously isn't also a very, very challenging situation given their own staffing. So right now, what's helping us is we are seeing a slight decrease in call volumes. And we think that's just because people are less likely to go to the hospital for non-critical emergencies. That's helping us a bit. And so that's helping us to, I think, stay somewhat balanced. But again, the situation with paramedic services is tenuous, and I think we do have a few difficult weeks in front of us. But I'm quite confident. I think Chief King and his team have a good handle on it, and our service is quite resilient. And our paramedics are a hardworking group of folks, and they did get us through the previous waves of the pandemic. I'm confident they'll get us through these ones.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I understand the stress on the healthcare system's pretty bad. So I was concerned that the wait times would be increasing, but I guess we'll get through it one way or another. So thank you.
We have some more questions for Michael. Okay, I don't see anybody. So, Councillor Chambers.
Thanks, John. Just through you to Michael and perhaps Mayor Bailey as well, and perhaps John Bell as well. I sit here in my little house here and see how basically strenuous the COVID issue is, and I field calls from people about this thing or this, that, or the other thing that in the long scheme of things may not be that important. And I feel as a counselor, I don't want to get in the way of what Michael is doing at the CAO level and the mayor is doing at the political level and what John is doing at the health unit. Is there anything that counselors can do to help the situation other than perhaps try to convince people to be patient and that kind of thing? I feel kind of helpless, and I know perhaps some of the other counselors are feeling the same way. And if there's anything that we as counselors can do, do you have any suggestions other than to just tell people to be patient and get vaccinated?
Mr. Chair, I'll answer first, and then I'll turn it over to the to Mayor Bailey. From the staff perspective, I mean, I think our approach as we go into this situation is to kind of just continue to conduct business as usual as long as we're able. So we've got a meeting tonight. We're dealing with a lot of good business tonight, and we've talked about, can we sustain a full committee cycle this month? And I think our intent is to try to do that. And if it turns out we can't do it, then we'll let you know. and we're hoping that council will be supportive of that decision if we decide that we can't do something like, for instance, sustaining a committee cycle or a full committee cycle. So again, that's our approach. We think that this is going to be with us for a while longer, and I think we have had to get used to it. But it's a complex time right now. So I think your suggestion to residents to be patient is a good one, because there will be some requirements for patience over the next few weeks, not only with the county, but with all of our allied healthcare partners and with a lot of other sections of the economy as well. Because the staffing shortages that I just talked about are not exclusive to the county. So that's my thoughts on it, and I'd happily turn it over to anyone else to speak. So thank you.
Mayor Bailey.
Yeah, just to Councillor Chambers' comments, I think the thing that I'm doing the most of is letting people know there's nothing really to be afraid of. It's when they call and they say that things aren't open and they're kind of high strung and they're wondering why their garbage is a little bit late, or the crossing guards are waiting to go back to work, and what's going on with the schools and all of those things. I think just being positive about the whole thing, I mean, and letting them know that this isn't something that's localized. This is, this is a worldwide deal. And I mean, you've got to just make every comment and every concern, give it some weight. You can't sort of say like, yeah, of course we're not going to be doing this because this is what's happening in the world. I just think being calm and being respectful of everyone's concerns, because everyone's wound very tight right now. And I think just being positive and just trying to get through it. It's tough. I mean, nobody's in their office and nobody's, in their at their desk. Everyone's doing the best they can from home. And I think we just have to acknowledge that the county is doing as well or better than anybody else. And the fact that our constituents aren't really all that concerned, that's why they're still, asking about funny little things. Why isn't this open and why isn't this open? Means that they're not really afraid of the big picture. And that's a testament to us and to the staff to keep everything calm and collected. If it was frantic and if it was out of control, they wouldn't be worrying about their garbage being picked up 10 minutes late. They'd be worried about bigger and more concerning issues. So I just think that we just have to be calm. There's nothing else we can do. If people are sick, they can't come to work, and we just have to support the staff that are still with us and hope that the other ones get better as soon as they can. So stay positive.
Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I can only give a second-hand commentary from the information we get. That's Mayor Bailey and I as members of the Board of Health. But I would follow Councillor Chambers' line of patience, of encouraging vaccinations, of asking people to follow the public health measures that we've been working with for the last 20 months or so. The Mayor puts out a little note every day on Facebook, which just reminds people. And so there's some fairly base level practices that we should all be following. But if we're looking for glimmers of hope, I could only say that the last set of statistics we got from the health unit showed that the number of people that were, the number of positive cases we had last week were less than the week before, which in itself is a step forward. The reproductive number had dropped again for a second week. So maybe it's not moving as fast as we thought it was moving. And I think the number of people we have locally hospitalized is 7, which is not a huge number relative to numbers we've seen in the past. And it's a lot lower than it was at times last week. So there are glimmers of hope on a grander scale. If you follow the same news that I follow, in South Africa, the wave of Omicron seems to have passed. It appears that that might be the case in other locations around the world. I can't comment, I'm not a health professional, but I just follow the stats as you do. But I think that there is some hope there that this will pass quickly, but it will be aided by people getting vaccinated, will be aided by people following the public health measures we've all seen, and people just bearing with it for a little longer. So I can't say more than that.
Very much appreciated. And I agree wholeheartedly. Councillor Laferriere.
And just to add, because the paramedics piece did come up, and as chair of the paramedic services, you look at the comments about our paramedics locally and in the community. I know myself and Mayor Bailey shared the letter to the editor that came out last week from a concerned mom who was just effusive in her praise for the County of Brant paramedics and how, not just the service, but how they're providing that service, because there's a lot going on there, including checking in after, and also that innovation has happened during this time in all of our services, but just paramedics as an example, the change to some more home-based and community-based interventions and things of that nature that have helped to keep people well and prevent people from getting ill. And when you look at some of our stats compared to other places, the one thing we always have to bring up though again is, look at the things we're doing, like the broadband, and also let's make sure we continue to support those small local businesses that really need our help right now. which we're doing at this council, but just to send that message out to anybody watching, it's time to get takeout again. It's time to make sure that you're supporting folks who have those smaller businesses.
Thanks very much for those comments. Do we have any other questions or comments? Well, thank you very much for the update, Michael. It's much appreciated, all the work that you guys are doing under the circumstances. Must be very difficult and challenging. Move on to other business. Is there any other? Oh, Mayor Bailey?
I just wanted to recognize through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor Chambers is concerned about feeling a disconnect because we feel the disconnect too. I feel the disconnect. And I know Michael does. When we get together and have our meetings like we did today, we wished everybody could be there because we all, the things that took the time, you'll see an article tomorrow in the paper and all the discussion and all the rigmarole of council that, I think, you're asking everybody everything twice and everyone has a different opinion and a comment. That's all very much missed right now when we're making decisions on our own. You don't understand how important the formality of a council and everyone's opinion and the going back and forth and seeing things a different way, how big of a deal that is with the decision making of any council. Sometimes you wish you had a smaller council so there was only 6 people to keep you on your toes. But you understand that 10 councillors, which we're used to, we're used to all of that back and forth. And I understand your disconnect because truly we feel it. I feel it at this end too. All the things that made us want to be on this council have all been taken away from us too. All the socialization, all the things that we love about being on council have been taken away too. So it's a very quiet time right now as far as everyone just see how chilled we can be and how respectful we can be of people that are maybe not in as good of a position as we're in. Some people have nothing going for them right now, and it's a very scary place to be. And I think we always have to be very respectful of that. So thank you. I just wanted to say that.
No, very poignant at this point. That's for sure. Okay. So any other business for today? Okay. Seeing none, could we have a motion to move in camera? Moved by Councillor House and second by Councillor Ferrier. All in favor, moving in camera? Okay, we'll move in camera then. Nancy? Are you able to change the screen, Nancy, so we can see everybody? Thanks. The only person we're missing now is Steve. But there is no further information, I don't think, to do at this point. And so we just, next meeting, February the 15th. And Nancy, if there's nothing else, then adjournment. Motion to adjourn.
Good night.
Okay, so good night. Motion to adjourn by Joan. Okay. Good night, all.